Well, hello everybody again. It's Vince Panel with Real Talk from Vince. And today I've been lucky enough to collar Russell Paterson from Bragg. He's the One Nation candidate who's running for Bragg at the moment. So we're going to see if we can give Russell a bit of a hard time and see how he goes handling it. No, I'm only kidding. So welcome aboard, Russell. How are you?
Thank you very much. Yeah, good. Glad to be here.
All right, mate. So the process is we're going to ask the same questions we've asked every other candidate. And the very first one, obviously, is who are you? And basically a little rundown on yourself.
Okay. Russell Paterson. I'm married to the same woman, my first wife, over 40 years. We have one son together. I'm self-employed, run a small engineering business, and my life is quite complex at times. So just, maybe ask me some questions is easier than me trying to rabbit on about what I've done and who I am.
All right. Well, I'll throw the first one in. You said that you were you run your own business, so you're a small business operator. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I downsized about 2.5 years ago, and so it's basically myself and then some casual staff, and I then liaise with other people, contract to other people for different tasks depending what it is that they want done. So the field that I'm in is engineering heat treatment. So we deal with steel, hardened pins and sprockets, that sort of thing for agriculture, earth moving, mining industries, that sort of thing.
Okay, so that puts you very much in touch with what's going on in the small industries then, I gather.
Yeah, I think it does, yeah.
All right. Okay, so we'll try and keep these questions as best as we can. So what was the reason you decided to stand for this party?
Okay, so it's not involved, but there's a little bit of a story. So over a number of years, so let me go back a little bit. My family's always been rusted on liberal. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold. Sorry about that. And over the last period of time, probably 20 years, I've become more and more disillusioned and disenfranchised with the way the Libs go about what they're doing. And to the point where in the most recent portion of history, I found myself aligned, or I found that One Nation is more aligned to my traditional beliefs than the Liberal Party are now. So I see that as not that I've changed, but the major parties have drifted away from their core supporter bases, and then that makes me look more right wing, but it also makes me line up more with One Nation. My family got pretty well sick and tired of me complaining about the state of the affairs and just generally, and said that I should put up or shut up, and so I stuck my hand up, and it's that simple.
Excellent. Okay. So going through the various questions you got here, one of the first ones about power bills, right? Power bills keep rising in South Australian households. What's your position on renewables, and do you think the pace of the transition has pushed electricity costs too high for ordinary families?
So let's break it down into the two sections.
Yep.
What's my personal view on renewables?
Yep.
I don't believe that they are the way forward for us as a state or as a nation. I think we need to take care of our resources. we need to protect the planet. We don't need to be habitual polluters and all of that sort of thing. So from that standpoint, anything we can do to do anything cleaner is a great idea. I personally don't believe renewables work at all. I think they cost more to produce in the first place than what we get back out of them. The life of renewables isn't long enough to warrant the effort that goes into producing them. And if CO2 is meant to be, which I don't believe it is, the big bad wolf of the atmosphere, it takes an awful lot of CO2 to produce all the componentry needed for renewables, and they're not effective. That doesn't cover the base load. It just doesn't work. So, but I don't think we should completely scrap it because we've already invested so heavily into it. So I think keep what we've got. But I'd really like to see Port Augusta fired back up again, Torrens Island fired back up again. We've got a wealth of coal. Black coal's better than brown, and we've got a wealth of natural gas. We should be using those because we can use those in a clean manner, and I don't believe the CO2 is an option. So that kind of answers the first part of that question.
Yep.
And I think the answer to the second part is absolutely renewables have driven up the price of energy despite the promises that they're going to bring energy prices down. That obviously hasn't been the case. We've got the dearest power pretty much anywhere in the world. And it's absolutely insane that burden is put on individuals and businesses alike. It's completely ridiculous.
All right. Well, this is going to be a throw-in question. As a small business owner, how have you found the electricity costs in running and doing what you need to do?
That's a really good question. My biggest piece of equipment is a 100 kilowatt low frequency induction heating machine. And I use a diesel generator to drive that machine because it's cheaper than using power off the grid.
Really? You use
Absolutely.
a diesel generator to power that?
Yeah, 200 kilowatt diesel generator.
Wow. Okay. Now that's an interesting sidestep. Okay. Well, we won't go into that further, but it does suggest that you know what you're talking about. All right. Cost of living pressures. South Australia are feeling pressure right now in both power, rego, insurance, council rates. What would you actually change this term to reduce everyday costs?
This question is going to be answered, and I think the content of it is going to pop up a few along the way as we go, not
Yep.
each time, but several times. One of the things I think that drives the cost of living up are the added costs that are added onto everything. So whether it's taxes for businesses, whether it's fees that tradies pay, whether it's excises and levies, whether it's all the stuff that's added on top of our council rates. I am an advocate for trimming away non-essential costs. So cutting red tape away and cutting the costs that go along with observing all of that bureaucracy.
Excellent. Okay, cool.
Does that answer your question?
It sure does. Okay, into housing. Right, rents are skyrocketing across South Australia. Do you accept that state planning decisions and immigrations have made the rental crisis worse? And what will you change immediately?
Housing is a really complex situation. Some of the costs of housing are covered in the question that we just had, which is red tape for builders, fuel costs, electricity costs, production costs for materials, delivery, excuse me, insurances. They're all driving housing prices up. Another thing that's driving housing prices up, I believe, is the cost of doing developments, so land developments, where previously let's say if we go back to the Playford era, where he set up a proper electricity grid, he took care of, ENWS, all the essential services. The government said, we're going to take care of these. We're going to put infrastructure in so that when, say, Elizabeth was built or whatever, any new development is, the state government puts that infrastructure in and then they regain the costs of that from the ratepayers and the users over a period of time. Now, some time ago, that stopped happening. So the state stops paying and putting the infrastructure in. So that cost is directly put against the people doing a subdivision or a development. So if you look at, say, Manapara West out there, off the Northern Expressway, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes going in out there. And the developers are the ones that have to put in electricity and transformers and pumping stations to collect groundwater. They have to put the roads in. They have to put the power lines underground. They have to put those in. They have to provide the footpaths and the gutters. They've got to pay all of that up front before they sell a block of land. And that adds immediately to the cost of the block. So one of the things that those people do is obviously they try to get as many blocks as possible into that area. So if they can only get 50, then they've got to amortise the costs over 50. If they can get 5,000, they amortise the cost over 5,000. So the blocks are getting smaller and the streets are getting smaller, everything's getting crammed in so that the developers can get those costs back. But that's still driving up the cost of living. So I think immigration adds to it. I mean, your question was specifically about immigration. And I think if we have 300,000 or 1 million or 3 million, however many people we bring into the country, if we don't have housing for the people we've got now, how can we have housing for those plus the ones that we bring in? So of course that's going to drive the price up. But that's not the only problem. I've worked in real estate as well as my engineering business for 25 years. And I've actually been party to, as a salesperson, selling property to immigrants, and the ones that I specifically think of are Sudanese, can't speak English, don't have a job, and yet they're there with an interpreter buying a house, and was government backed and funded. So if our government is paying for immigrants to have housing where Australian citizens are struggling to make ends meet, struggling to get a loan, can't buy a house, that also is going to push the price of housing up,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yep. Okay. Brilliant.
So I would change the things that it's we don't want to get into a position or a place where we say everything is rubbish and we have to dismantle and deconstruct everything, because our whole system would become just complete chaos. It wouldn't work. But what we've got to do is we've got to look at each system individually. So whether it's roads or housing or power or the medical, whether it's hospitals or whether it's the ambulance system, whatever it happens to be, look at each one of those units and say, all right, how can we take away the things that are costing us money that are not adding value without damaging the value of that structure?
Yeah. Okay. Well,
That's the job.
You mentioned ambulances in there, which is actually the next question. So we might as well tie that one in here while we're at it.
Sure.
People are waiting hours for ambulances in South Australia. What is your plan to fix ramping, and when should the public expect to see some improvements if your party gets into power?
Right. The questions that you're asking, all of them are saying, what's my plan to fix these things?
Yep.
The truth is that I don't have the capacity to implement any single plan. I can only share with you
Right.
my perspectives and my ideas. If our party gets in, then together we will formulate a plan to deal with the individual topics that we're talking about. So I can't speak on behalf of the whole of One Nation. I can speak on my own perspectives and thoughts. So
Which is
if
what we're
that's
after.
okay that I do that, then
Yep.
I can talk about ramping and so on. So again, it's a complex issue. I wonder whether some of the reasons, you'll recall not all that long ago, there was some government ads saying, and it was on the television, and there were people that were vomiting, there were people that, had a broken arm, there were people, all these different people, and they were saying, if you're suffering from these things, don't go to the hospital, go to your GP or a clinic. Did you recall those ads?
Yep.
Yep. So I looked at those and I think, all right, that's great, but why are those people going to the hospital in the first place? Why aren't they going to a clinic? So this is still to do with ramping, right? I haven't lost my train of thought. So I just wanted to explain. So if all of those people in those advertising campaigns, if all of them, everybody that fit any of those criteria, stopped going to the emergency department of a hospital and they went to their GP or a clinic, then I wonder whether our hospitals would be freed up and the availability or the ability of ambulances to get genuine patients into a hospital would be easier. So that's one aspect. Now, how do you
So,
stop those people going to the ED that should be going somewhere else? And I think one of the reasons is that you've got to bring back a mechanism where it doesn't cost you to go to the doctor or a clinic. Remove the gap. There are so many people that are struggling. If it costs you 30 or 50 or 60 or $100 gap, and you've got, mum and dad and 4 kids, and you're in and out of hospital, with all of these symptoms, if it costs you money every time you go to the doctor, of course you're going to go to the emergency department of the hospital to try to get these treated because you don't get charged for it. Where
mm,
if people could actually get if there was no gap between the cost of visiting the doctor, if you didn't have to pay extra, I think more people would go to clinics and doctors. On top of that, you would then have to ensure that we actually had enough clinics and doctors to service those people. So I think that would take some of the pressure off ramping. Another thing is with the ambulance is that so many people now don't actually think, I'm not feeling well, I'll go to the doctor. They ring an ambulance. And so you've got people using an ambulance service that shouldn't actually be calling an ambulance. And so that may be an education requirement. And if we can remove that stress off the ambulance service so that you've actually got ambulances being called out for genuine emergencies and not for things that aren't genuine emergencies, I think that would relieve some of the stress and pressure on ambulances getting into ED departments in the hospital. So I think that's something else that can happen. But then apart from that, everything else has got to work smoothly. So we've got to have enough ambulances and we've got to have enough staff at the ED departments so that they can service those patients coming in via the ambulance.
yeah.
Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yes, it did. And just to clarify, yes, the questions I am asking are directed at you personally, not the party, because I'm looking for each individual person's perspective.
Yeah.
So thank you for answering those as that is, because obviously as a party you would make ideas come together, but it's everybody's personal ideas like you just put forward, which is brilliant. Which raised another question. I know I'm hitting you with more questions than anybody else, so that must mean you're throwing some good ideas out there.
Maybe.
There's no real there's no real clinics open after business hours.
No, I'm not sure that that's exactly the case everywhere in the state, but as a generalisation, yeah, I think that's right. So there's been look, sometimes governments and bureaucracy systems, they're not a bad thing, right? So let's just presume that not everybody is evil and out to destroy our state or our economy or our world. But sometimes things that are implemented actually, while they might be a good idea, they don't work very well. And if we find that they don't work very well, then we need to adjust that. So with the medical things, if we're looking at it and saying, well, there's pressure on the hospitals, why, particularly the emergency departments, Why is that? And then step back, and then, as I say, I think maybe we could remove the gap and we could have clinics. Well, then that might mean that we need to address that by actually producing those services, which actually raises another point. And this is something I think is pretty critical as far as government, whether it's councils or whether it's state government or whether it's the federal government. So where people aren't really talking about the state debt, which is it's heading towards $50 billion. And it probably doesn't mean that much because it's just a number. The problem, as I see it, is that I mentioned earlier Tom Playford. So a lot of the infrastructure that we use in this state was set up and made work because of that government of the day. And we're still riding on the back of those decisions that those statesmen made back in the day. So you live in a house, I live in a house, irrespective of whether you own it or you're renting it. If you're living in a house and there's no maintenance done on that, but you spend your money on furniture and TVs and refrigerators and couches and cars that you put in the garage, and you want to upgrade the garden, you put a swimming pool in, so you keep adding and replacing and improving the trimmings that go with the house. But over 50 years, you don't do any maintenance. At some point or another, the gutters are going to fall off, the roof's going to leak, the paving's going to heave, and there are things that are going to go wrong with it. And if it's left neglected for too long, then the whole thing falls in a heap on top of itself. And I think to some degree, that's my concern. I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening within the state, but I think it is to some degree. So I think the funds that the state government gets in, we should be looking at doing upkeep and maintenance work so that our hospitals, our roads, our power, our water, all of those things remain intact and they're secure. And
Yep.
then focus on other things. But if we're focusing on a lot of extra trimming things that aren't essential to the running of the state, perhaps our government isn't focusing as much as it should do on the things that are important, not the things that are nice.
Okay. That's very diplomatic of you. I know where that one's going. I'm going to leave that one at that spot. Okay, so with that comes obviously access to GP and healthcare. Many South Australians can no longer find bulk billed GPs. Do you
Yep.
accept that this is happening?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a problem.
Okay. How would you stop regional communities from losing hospitals, services, and local jobs?
Are you talking about like the Keith Hospital and places like that? That they
Anywhere,
need to be
theoretically.
funded. They need to, that the policy needs to be that we stop trying to bring everybody into the city into a central place to get everything done. Right? There used to be a time where you could go, if you were in Keith, you could go there and have a baby. If you're in the Barossa, you could have a baby at the Tanunda Hospital or the Angaston Hospital. But everything's being centralised. So everyone's being pushed into, the Lyle Mac or the Royal Adelaide or Flinders, or the one at what's the one at Tea Tree Gully, the
Mulberry
hospital there, Modbury.
Hospital.
And they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And look, I don't know because it's outside of my field of expertise
Okay.
in
Yep.
reality. But I know with houses, if you build a house that is very small, the cost per metre is quite high. Then there comes a point that as the house gets bigger, it actually becomes more efficient per square metre to build that home or that house, that building. And then it gets to a point where it actually gets bigger again, and then the cost starts blowing out again, and it becomes much more expensive per square metre. And my personal opinion is that's what happens with hospitals and medical centres. They keep adding onto them because they want everything centralised, rather than saying, okay, actually this thing is got so big that if it gets any bigger, we can't manage it properly, we can't maintain it properly, we can't give the level of care properly that we need to. We should just keep or build another facility somewhere else. So rather than shutting everything down and trying to bring it into central locations, we should be allowing those communities that are regional to develop and build their medical and hospitals and all of that sort of stuff, whether it's the fireys, whoever it is, as their communities build and expand.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
my take on it anyway.
Beautiful. Well, with all of that, you've actually probably answered the other part of that question, was what would you do differently to fix access to healthcare? You've pretty much mapped that out already, so I don't think we'll worry about that question. Crimes in suburbs and regions. People in both suburban and regional South Australia feel less safe than they did 5 years ago. Why do you think that is, and what would you change?
Oh, heaps. There's heaps of things that we can do. So I think that's true. I think people are feeling less secure. It was one of the things that I wrote down before I actually put my hand up. What safety, community safety was one of those things. So we can't just lob that onto the police and say, well, the police should be taking care of it. We can't lob it at the teachers at the schools and say, well, they should be taking care of it because the kids are running amok. These things, issues start in the home, in everybody's individual home. None of us are isolated from our neighbours or the people in our immediate community or each other from within our state, and our state's not isolated from anybody else in the country. Everybody should be doing their bit. Teachers don't have the capacity to hold kids accountable for their actions. Some parents, not all, don't hold their kids accountable for their actions. They make excuses for them. The courts make excuses for people and don't hold them accountable for their actions. And we're seeing this as a philosophical principle.
Sorry, mate.
I'll
I've
let
got
you
to turn
take
my
that.
phone off.
That's all right. I see it as a philosophical principle that's wrong. So we used to have, when I was a kid growing up, if I was out mucking around and I shouldn't have been, and the local copper got a hold of me, he would have given me a smack in the ear and sent me home. And if he actually followed me home and my old man found out about it, he would have given me a clip under the ear as well. You're not allowed to do that sort of thing anymore. So am I an advocate of corporal punishment? Not necessarily, but I think that when you have a community that watches out for each other and there is a respect for authority, so you respect your elders. That got drummed into me as a kid. So if somebody, if I was a child, an adult said to me, listen, don't do that, you shouldn't be doing that, I wouldn't tell them where to get off. I would have stopped doing it because that was the right thing to do. But there's a general lack of respect right through the community. And it's got to start in the home. I'm not saying everybody's disrespectful, but there's a saying that says, where the people lose hope or where there is no vision, they cast off restraint or they perish, right? So what that's saying is when people don't see something good in their future, when they're not hopeful for a good future, when they don't actually believe there's something out there that we're working towards that's a good thing, then they don't give a rat's, right?
Yeah.
Those disciplines fall off. And then we start to see breakdown, and it breaks down in kindies, it breaks down in schools, it breaks down on the street, it breaks down everywhere. So you're talking about repeat offenders. That's kind of trying to shut the gate after the horse has bolted. But to answer the question, I think if you've got serial offenders, and at some point, all of us have got to be accountable for the choices we make.
Right. So that
If
goes
I go
into this.
through a red light and get a ticket, I can't, there's no, okay, so I have a Christian faith. And my philosophical approach to life is pretty basic. I believe one day I'll stand before God and I won't be able to justify a poor or bad response to any situation. So, let's just say whether people believe in God or not, but let's just say that one day we happen to stand before our Maker. Will I have lived a perfect life? Absolutely not. Will there be things in there that if I stood before God, he said, why did you do this? I'm not going to be able to justify it by blaming someone else or saying I had a hard life or something else. The buck stops with me, right? So ultimately, we've all got to be accountable for something at some point in time. And if people are just let off, they're not taught accountability. And the later that lesson comes, the more difficult it is.
Okay. All right. Well, we are already into 30 minutes into this interview. You happy to keep going?
Sure, mate.
Okay, no worries. Should repeat youth offenders who are commit violent crimes face jail times? Yes or no? It's a yes or no one.
Oh, I can't answer that question because it depends on the circumstance. So,
Okay,
for
good answer.
example, if you've got a kid that's had the suitcase knocked out of him by his father, and that happens all the time, and he is violent to someone else repeatedly, who's responsible? Is it the child or is it the parent?
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but it can't just be no all the time, right?
Okay. Yep. Cool.
There has to be a consequence for the actions. So yes, I
Yep.
believe there has to be a consequence for the actions. Absolutely. Nobody,
Okay.
it doesn't matter what it is. There's got to be some kind of consequence to the action.
Yeah. Good answer. Excellent.
Einstein said it
Right.
right. Every action has an equal and
Has
opposite
opposites and
reaction.
equal
So you can't
reaction.
keep doing bad things and expect nothing to happen back. Right? It's got to
Yeah.
come back
Yeah.
and bite in the bum sometime.
Okay. SA roads are deteriorating with potholes becoming a real issue. Will you prioritise
Are
fixing
they?
existing roads before before funding new transport projects? Don't throw that at me.
Oh, like they are. The roads are terrible. You know, I've driven down some roads and hit a pothole, and it's you've got a mag wheel on the car because lots of cars come with mag wheels, and it breaks the wheel. Potholes are
Mm.
that bad. You drive on them one day and it rains, and the next day you come along and there's a pothole there because the water's got underneath it, and the trucks are pounding that water under the bitumen. It's not the truck's fault, and then you've got a pothole. No, well, I think I've covered it. Maintenance needs to be done. But it's not all
Yeah.
the state government's fault because some roads are council responsibility. And with the money that councils generate, they should be focusing on, rubbish, roads, those types of things, not the accessories that go, with councils
All right.
doing the
I'm
things that
going
they
to
do. So
throw one at you on that
roads
one,
need to
right?
be fixed, right?
I'm going to throw one at you on that. Councils, although they do get some funding from the government, from the state government, right? The petrol excise tax that we pay and all the relevant red light cameras, speeding cameras, and everything else that brings money into the state are supposed to be for the roads. So
You're talking about
why should
safety
it be the
cameras?
council's
Are
responsibility
you
for
talking
roads?
about safety cameras? Safety cameras,
Oh yeah,
the ones
sorry.
that are
Did
saving
I did
people's
I
lives on the
didn't
side of
say
the road.
did I say revenue raising devices? I didn't say that, did I?
Well, that's what they are. Of course they are. It all goes into the general coffers. It's insane. It is
Yeah,
revenue
but shouldn't,
raising.
what I'm saying is that it all goes in the general coffers of the state. So why are councils being made responsible for roads? Shouldn't the state be handling that? Sorry, you were copying
No,
so many questions.
no, because there's some. Well, it depends what council area you're in. There are some. I mean, some of our roads are designated national highways. Well,
Yep.
the repairs and maintenance of those are the responsibility of the federal government. Some of
Yep.
the roads, the lesser roads, are the responsibility of the state. Then there are other roads that are the responsibility of the council, and that's why the state government funds councils to do those types of works, right? So it's kind of logical that you can't have one group doing, unless you get rid of councils altogether and get rid of that level of government, then the state could take care of all the roads. But I don't think that would be too popular.
Right. Well, not being too much into councils and not sure, but I don't know how much funding they actually get for the roads. But anyway.
Well,
All right, moving on.
say Birdwood, let's say Birdwood, right?
Yep.
Or or any of those towns in the Adelaide Hills, there's a state road up to the main street, and then the council is responsible for the main street, and then when it becomes a state road again or a highway, it becomes
Yeah.
the responsibility of the state government. And that's why you're having these discussions about not running heavy transport through towns and that sort of thing. But then the state government needs to actually build a bypass or some other mechanism to get that traffic off of those main streets. So if you didn't have heavy traffic in council areas, on council roads, councils wouldn't have to do the maintenance as much as they do now. I don't think. I haven't seen the stats on it, but that would be my understanding. But I think it's logical that they each one takes responsibility, but they all should be doing more than they actually are. That's the
Yeah.
problem, is that there's so many roads that are in disrepair, so many of them that are dangerous, and the revenue's being taken, whether it's fuel tax or wherever it's coming from, and it's not going back to those essential services that should be being provided. So yeah, that has to be dealt with.
Okay, excellent. All right, moving on to small businesses. Your forte. Small businesses are closing under rising state costs and regulation. What would you cut, freeze, or change to keep them operating?
It depends on the small business. So if we're looking at contractors, electricians, plumbers, that sort of thing, they they get to a point where they are qualified, they get their ticket, they become an electrician. They shouldn't be paying yearly fees for their licenses. They are licensed, they've passed, they've got their credential. What professor at a university has to pay a fee every year so that he or she can then continue to teach at a university? They've got their degree, right? Here's their degree, they hold it up. Here's my degree. They've got it once. They've paid for it when they've got it by paying for their education or whatever it happens to be. They don't keep paying for it. So nobody should be paying those fees at all on anything once they're qualified. Now, if they need to have ongoing training and so on, well, that would be right. So in real estate, there's various courses that you do, and the REI and different bodies put up different training days so that you're kept up to date with rules and regulations and all of that sort of thing. But there shouldn't be ongoing fees for that sort of thing. So that's one thing that would make that part of it easier for a lot of people. But then you've got all the fees that go along with if you want to dig here and if you want to cut that down and if you want to put this up. So all of that bureaucracy, all of that red tape that is associated with charging people just for going about trying to do their daily work, all of that should come off. When businesses get a bit bigger, and they're still small businesses, so maybe they employ 100 people, part-timers, that sort of thing, people at service station chains or whatever it happens to be, maybe we should look at actually getting rid of payroll tax, because payroll tax was only there before income tax came in. It never should have been there afterwards. I know one business operator, he employs about 100 people. He's paying $20,000 a month in payroll tax. So that's just like extra taxation for employing people. It shouldn't be there. Get rid of it, particularly if you're a South Australian business. So if you're an overseas business, a corporate or an interstate business, sure, charge them the tax. But if your business is registered here in South Australia, remove that tax from them, payroll tax. And then in the case of the chap I'm thinking of, he could employ another 3 or 4 people.
Yeah, true. All right.
So there's lots of things that can be done to make it easier for business so that they're more profitable, and it benefits everybody.
Okay. All right, we'll move along. The next one is education. Teachers say they are burnt out and classrooms are overcrowded. What changes will you make now rather than waiting for another review or inquiry?
I would get back to, this is going to sound a bit archaic, I'm sure, the 3 R's: reading, writing and arithmetic, and sport. Kids need to be playing sport. a lot of the other stuff, not all of it, it's not all bad, right? So I don't want to chuck the baby out with the bathwater, but there are so many other things that are pushed into requirements in the classroom that if teachers didn't have to do those things, if they concentrated on the basics, and I'm sure the teachers would actually know and be able to identify and suggest things that could be done to improve that. So obviously it would be in consultation with them. But I think getting back to basics, remove stuff that doesn't really need to be there, and that would make teachers' lives a bit easier. I
Okay.
think, we need to get more people through the education system. We need more people qualified as teachers. I've got a friend of mine who has actually done some training. He sort of wanted to change careers mid, he's a fair bit younger than me, but mid career. So he used to be a panel beater. He wants to be a teacher. And he's been doing his training and so on. And he's finding it really difficult because every time he is with kids, he feels that people look at him as though he's some kind of deviant. There's males, there's not very many men that stay in teaching, and there should be. Kids need to have female and male role models. They need both. So you need to change the system so that people aren't afraid to become teachers. There are a lot of teachers that uh, they start off with they want to do this, they want to work with kids, they get in there, they do it for 2 or 3 years, and then they can't hack it, they get out. My wife's actually has a Bachelor of Education, majored in music and English, and has been in the education system, not the state education system. She's a private tutor and works as a private tutor in state and private schools, government and private schools. And it's a problem. The teachers are understaffed, they're under resourced. There's so many things, so many hoops you've got to go through, to get a new pencil and an eraser. You've got to talk to 10 different people and sign 50 different pieces of paper. All of that needs to change. It's ridiculous. It's insane. The
Yep.
levels of bureaucracy that are just have latched onto everything. It's all got to be pruned off so that it can grow healthily.
Yep. Excellent. All right. Next one. Emergency powers. During COVID, many South Australians were told to take a vaccine or lose their job. Many more were coerced into taking a vaccine and were injured. Do you support compensation for those that were injured and for those who refused a vaccine and lost their employment as a result?
Right. I'm going to answer that in a minute. Ask me the question again. I think that when COVID first started, there were some people that said, this is a load of rubbish, I don't believe it. There are some people that thought, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. And then there were people in the middle ground, probably I was there in that, it doesn't sound right, but like what if they are right? We should probably go along with it. And so I think to a certain degree, we trusted our system to do the right thing by us. And when those emergency powers came in, while I didn't like them because I don't like my autonomy and my freedoms being curtailed or restricted, I sort of could understand, because it was in the best interest of everybody. However, in retrospect, that was a lot of bunkum. And so it shouldn't have happened. So I'm against those emergency powers happening, full stop. They should never have gone in. A lot of people have been damaged. Friends of ours, a couple, the chap's wife has suffered from long COVID and can't get, they can't treat it. They don't know how to fix it. She can't get benefits. She can't work. It's terrible what happens to people with these things. I'm not sure that saying, yes, I advocate for compensation is the right thing to do. If you could get the pharmaceutical companies to, right, because ultimately they're the ones that peddled everything onto us. We believed the spiel, they peddled us their drugs, and we found out that not only were they not necessary, but they've harmed people. So I think I don't think the state government should be paying compensation to people for those problems, but I think the pharmaceutical companies should be. Absolutely.
Okay, excellent answer.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that answers the question well. I'm going to throw it. Geez, you copying all the throw-ins. Sorry, Russell.
That's all right.
What about those, and I'm marking myself as one of those, who was literally blackmailed or coerced into taking that injection? I didn't accept blackmail because, as far as I knew, blackmail and coercion was illegal. So I stood my ground, but I did lose my job because of it. Do you think there should be some recompense come back at somebody for that? No, I don't normally ask other people. So people who are
No,
listening to
no,
it,
I hear. Let me think about what you're actually saying. Do I think the state government should be responsible for that?
or somebody needs to answer for it, I believe. That's just my personal
Uh,
opinion.
if so, let's just flip the page here. Let's just say that was the case, and the state government had to reimburse people like yourself and many others that were, falsely. Although at the time it wasn't falsely because they changed the legislation, so it wasn't, the wrong thing to do. But in hindsight, it was the wrong thing to do. But if you said, well, the state government has to pay for that, who actually pays for it?
I'm not saying they have to pay for it. I'm saying somebody needs to be held accountable for it.
Right. Now, in that, I would say that's absolutely correct. And that's actually the platform I'm standing on. So I want to be the member for Bragg so that I have the responsibility of being accountable for the people in that electorate.
Okay. Yep.
Right. So I think, yes, accountability is a big thing. The government should be accountable. But so let's just say yes, right? Let me just say yes. The answer to your simple answer to your question is yes. The difficult thing is I don't think it's ever going to happen because they don't want to open themselves up to litigation,
Yep.
where if they sort of said, look, we stuffed up, we did the wrong thing, we made a mistake, we're really sorry that this has happened to everyone, can we please move on? And everyone said, yep, that's fine, then I'd be absolutely for that. But
Right.
as soon as a lawyer gets involved
Yep.
and there's a class action, it could be like the state bank. I mean, our state could be paying, and it's not that I don't feel for your personal situation, but I don't know how we'd get out of that if there was a class action and everyone moved against the state government and then the state had to pay reparations for everything that went wrong through COVID because one thing would just build on another and another and another as a legal precedent. So I don't think I don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't think it can happen. I would like them to be able to say, we made a mistake, we got it wrong. And that was Stephen Marshall, not the Labor government,
Yes. No, I
right?
understand that.
That was the Liberal
All right.
government, not the Labor government. So, if the Labor government got up and said, "Yeah, look, that was all wrong. It shouldn't have happened," they're still the ones. The government is still the government. They're still going to be responsible for the compensation. So I just can't see that it's going to happen. It would be
No.
nice if we lived in a world that could happen, but I don't think it will happen.
Okay. See, that's good. That's a good logical answer, and that's what I like about it. So, thank you for that. Okay, so Malinaskis, and I actually managed to say his name correctly, has introduced even stricter emergency powers that has damaged the public trust in South Australia. Do you agree with them, or would you try and get these laws repealed?
No, I'd try to get them repealed.
Okay,
There you
well,
go.
that was a quick answer and an easy one. Listening to locals. Now, if your local community overwhelmingly opposed a government's decision, say you were in government, will you vote against your party to represent them? Yes or no? In other words, will
Yes
you
or
cross?
no? Yes and no. Okay, so again, in an ideal world, the answer would be yes. But if it was something, so let's just say that so the legislation changed, and a baby was born, and it was discovered that it was deformed and there was something wrong with it, and it's going to be a cost to the community, and the system, and the parents are distraught, and they say we should never, if we'd known, we would have aborted that child, and they only find out the moment that it's born, and legislation comes in to say, should we be allowed to terminate that life? And my community said yes. I would have to say no.
Okay.
Right?
And that's because of your
But
Christian beliefs. Yeah.
well, just it might be, but it might be something else, right? So I'm talking about a live child that's actually given birth and has come into the world. Should you kill it or not because it's deformed? I would have to say no. I can't imagine any circumstance that I would say, yes, let's do that. That's a good thing to do. However, if that's the proviso, then pretty much anything that doesn't really stand against what I personally believe, morally, then yeah, absolutely. That's the job, is to actually be an advocate for the community.
Yeah.
And it's a privilege to be able to do that. That's how it should be looked at. It's a privilege to advocate for the people in your electorate.
Yep. Excellent. No worries. Okay. What's one decision that by the current South Australian government that you believe has made life harder for ordinary South Australians?
I don't think there is one. I think it's there's an insidiousness on both sides of politics that are leading us down a trail, and it's death by 1,000 cuts, and it's got to a point this election, which I think will historically in history will show it's going to be pivotal in the way people look at elections and look at politics and how our state moves forward. But I think, as I have, many people have just had enough. I don't think it is one thing. I don't think there's one thing that Mr. Malinowskis has done that I would actually slag him about, right? Personally, like if I got to talk to him personally. But I do think that over a period of time, there's so many things that are not being done correctly for the benefit of the state, and it's killing us all slowly. We're being bled dry.
Okay. Excellent. Right. Last and final. Why should voters choose you as their representative? So now you get to do your little spiel, if you've got one.
Well, I've probably had an amount of that over this last time, whatever it is, 45 minutes or whatever it is. But
52.
this is
You
what I
do
would
it well.
say. This is what I would say first of all. This has to be the most passionate I've seen people in South Australia around a state election. The passion is there for the Liberals, for Labor, for people that are in between. People have very passionate perspectives about things. And I think that that's great, because it means people are thinking about, who am I going to vote for? They're not just going to go and do what they've done methodically, blindly, if you like, in the past. So I think that's terrific. What I would say is that if you honestly believe that, let's say, the Labor government has contributed everything that they can to the betterment of South Australia, and if you have 100% confidence in them and you don't have any criticism or complaint at all, then stick by your convictions and vote for them. And it's the same with the Liberal Party. So if you're a Liberal person, then if that's the party and you look at them and say there's nothing that they could have done better, I'm happy with everything, that I'm completely satisfied, right? Then if you're completely satisfied with whichever party it is that you normally vote for, then stick to your convictions and vote for those people. But if you are not completely satisfied, if there is an inkling that things could be done better or differently, or that we need to begin to steer things in a different direction to improve the hope and future for our state, then I would say vote for One Nation. Anybody that's in One Nation, my electorate, anybody's, because they're all people that are not career politicians. They're people that are actually going, enough is enough. We need to stand up and make a difference. All of the people that I've met want to represent their community, want to advocate for the people in their electorate, and want to listen. I actually want, if I get in, I want to have my office open. I actually want people to come in and talk to me and tell me their problems. Tell me the things that are going wrong. Explain why systems aren't working. Who am I to turn around and say, well, this should be done and you should do this and this is what we're going to do, when clearly nobody's actually listening to the general public. So I think the first key is listen to the general public. That's what I want to do. Vote One Nation One. And then after that, doesn't matter where you put your preferences. Put them wherever you want. Doesn't make any difference. Just put One Nation One.
Yes, I have noticed that the preference cards have come out from the Libs and Labors. Well, I haven't seen any Libs yet, but I saw Labors, and also saw some One Nation ones come out, and they only specify one vote and then make sure you fill out the rest of the boxes. So they're not guiding anybody at all.
The Labor Party,
very interesting.
The Labor Party and the Liberal Party, neither of them wanted to give us preferences, but they wanted our preferences. So as a group, right, it was decided that the best thing we can do is put One Nation One, and we don't give anybody any preferences.
Yep. Okay. Excellent. All right, Russell. So Russell is from Russell Paterson's from Bragg. The Bragg there. I think you guys have got somebody who's got his finger on the pulse. So check out this interview, and hopefully you will do so. And a bit of a shameless plug here. Sorry for this. These T-shirts, we have them for sale on VOF, our merch store at VOF. And this is a little bit of a saying against those who want to burn our Australian flag. We are proud Australians. Come join us. And that's for everybody who treats themselves as an Australian. And I don't care where they're from.
Absolutely.
Right. So
you got them in triple XL?
Have you got them
in triple XL, Vince? Excellent.
Yes. Yep.
Put
they're
my
on
name
our
down.
merch.
I'll have one of those for sure.
Right, I'll put the links down in the description below. But thank you very much, Russell, for your time today. It is the longest one we've done, nearly an hour. So, and
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry, I threw in some. No, it was my fault. I threw in extra questions because it was such an entertaining interview. So, thank you very much. All right, people. So, once again, we've got elections coming up on the 21st. Remember that preferences are your preferences and they're extremely powerful. So make sure you use them correctly. Hopefully I will be able to release a little idea on how lower house preferences go. I'm doing a preference interview, a preference showing on actual papers moving around and how it actually works. And I'm hoping to record that and put that up on FBN Media. And it's non-political. It's Party A and Party B, Party C. So there's no politics in it, just how the count moves. But with that, once again, Russell, how can people get in touch with you if they want?
Facebook. I've got a web address which is on the One Nation site, and they can phone me 0418 811 397.
All right. So everybody got that? And if you didn't, you'll need to rewind and try again. All right. Thank you very much, Russell, for a great interview. All right.
Thank you.
Stand by, everybody, while we sign ourselves out.